Alright, fight fans, welcome back to the channel. Today we've got episode 17, Uriah Hall versus Silva. First back-to-back breakdowns in over a month. So I'm keen for a bit of regularity. A quick recap of last week. I only managed to scrape the top 60% on verdict, which is a bit unfortunate because I still actually managed to hit 5 of the 6 tips correctly. I did lose that one underdog play in Jacob Malkoon. I think the reason why I didn't really manage to get too much XP is I only got one method correct in the Whitaker decision, that being my best call of the night, and my worst call was obviously that Malkoon pick, knocked out in 18 seconds. Just couldn't handle that pressure and the hands of Philip Halls, of course, and the footwork just wasn't quite good enough to circle off the cage and avoid that heat early. I'm still not convinced with Halls. I'll likely look to fade him next time out, but maybe that's just me being salty. To the bottom of this card, we'll get straight into it. We've got Bobby Green versus Thiago Moises. Bobby Green is 1.19 times on verdict and $1.37 at the bookies. Thiago Moises is 6.33 times and $3.11 at the bookies. Green 27-10 with 1 no contest as a pro. Moises is 13-4. So as I've just kind of outlined, Green the considerable favourite here, both on verdict and at the bookies. And you know, Moises obviously a really dangerous grappler, but still relatively green in MMA. Hasn't shown me heaps that I like in the UFC thus far. And to be honest, I struggle to see Bobby losing in this spot. You know, this year Bobby's fighting with new drive and hunger, this being his 4th fight already in 2020. And all 3 of his previous fights this year have been absolute landslides, you know. All 3 of those bouts have gone to decision, but by and large that is Bobby's win method. He's only won 4 fights via finish in his UFC career. And those 3 decisions have all been pretty easy decisions. As to his skill set, considerably well-rounded, super confident in his hands, fights longer than his reach suggests, with the jab, straight attacks. He uses kicks well, regularly mixing up to the legs, also targets the body extremely efficiently, and then defensively sound as well in the striking department, boasts almost a 2-strike differential per minute in his favour, and that in large comes down to his kind of footwork, head movement. You only have to watch 1 or 2 of his fights to really get a grasp of how good he is at that. He often fights with his hands down, you know, lures his opponents into range, into the big shot, thinking they can crack him, and then responds so quickly to get his head off the center line, shift his base whilst countering. It's a really entertaining brand of style to watch. His wrestling game is also something I wanted to mention. He has always had the ability, but recently he's been utilising it more and more. And if you actually look at the numbers, he's managed to secure at least 1 takedown in each of his last 7 fights, has landed multiple in each of his last 4. And once on the ground, you know, he doesn't exactly mount overwhelming offense, but the jiu-jitsu is there. He's got 9 wins in his career via submission, and he's just ultra consistent with initiating the grappling scenarios. He'll typically look to chase a takedown or 2 in each round, lock up points with some ground control time, and just typically wear on his opponent, you know. As for Moises, I'll go to him now. 3 wins by knockout, but he will be outmatched on the feet here. Does throw a lot of kicks, loves to go upstairs with it, but he just is on the same level as Bobby. He struggles to set a pace in his fights, typically the one getting backed up to the cage, which will be exactly what happens here. Bobby always sets the pace in his fights and really looks to overwhelm his opponents with volume and pressure. Moises doesn't have the ability to compete in a fight like that, in my opinion. He struggles with the volume from what I've seen. We've seen that in his fights, particularly the Damir Ismagulov bout. And we've then also seen him controlled for large portions of fights with grappling, as dangerous as he is. You know, he's threatening on the ground for sure, but in terms of on his back, or when he's getting, when he's having to be defensive with the wrestling, he only really chases the guillotine on a double leg when he's backed up against the cage. Once he's actually on his back, put on the canvas, his offense pretty lackluster for such accredited black belt. And then we did see in the Beneil Dariush fight just how difficult he finds it to get back up. You know, Beneil in a 15-minute fight had 11 odd minutes of control time, had his back multiple times as Moises tried to scramble back up, and you know, he did defend that well, but Beneil still had his back, had hooks in, had the body lock. And Beneil's obviously a very classy grappler, but it just shows me kind of there's areas to exploit there. And essentially, kind of as the odds represent, this is Bobby Green's fight to lose. I think he'll come forward all fight and have lots of success kind of wearing Moises down with the striking. He'll work the body heaps, like we saw plenty of Moises' opponents go to, Michael Johnson, Ismagulov, Dariush. They all did that very well. Bobby will need to be careful at times, you know. Moises often shoots takedowns off the cage when he's getting pressed backward. He always looks to shoot at the start of rounds, and then, you know, he does look for that guillotine off his opponent's double legs. But I think Bobby has a high enough IQ to avoid those three dangers, have his way in the striking department completely, and then also gather some control time on the mat. I've seen other predictors, other people saying that Bobby would be wise to not use his wrestling in this one due to the BJJ of Moises, but, you know, and that might be the game plan as well. But we've seen other fighters implement the wrestling against him and not be subbed. Speaking to Dariush again, who is high-level grappler, but then Kurt Holloway, much lower level. He's 0-5 in the UFC, and he managed to take down Moises 2 times, I think it was, and get some control time as well. You know, it's not like Thiago's Damian Maia here. To my pick, Bobby likely wins a decision. Like I did say previously, it's his main win condition, but at 1.73 times, I don't really like it. So given Bobby's recent track record with the takedown game, evident ability on his resume with the jiu-jitsu, and then Moises' issues getting back to his feet in the past and tendency to give up his back, I'm going to roll out with a Bobby Green submission. Monstrous odds at the moment, 62.28 times, which I love. I'm going to play the third round on that as well. Moises is a handy grappler, is wise defensively, but Bobby's going to put pressure on him like none of his previous opponents have, and I feel like he might wilt and result in a late stoppage there. So a bit of a risky one, but at the odds I think it's worth the risk for sure. Next fight along, Maurice Green versus Greg Hardy. Maurice Green, the underdog on verdict, 3.78 times, and at the bookies $3.40. Greg Hardy 1.36 times on verdict and $1.32 at the bookies. Maurice is 9-5 as a pro. Hardy 6-2 with 1 no contest. This isn't a fight I need to spend too long on at all. I think that Greg Hardy should make it look easy. Maurice Green just really isn't it. His commitment's not there. Bad habits inside and outside of the cage. His fight IQ leaves a lot to be desired. Sure, dangerous submission guy. Give him some credit for that, especially for a heavyweight. It's not something you typically see. He's got 5 career wins as a pro via submission. But you actually look through the stats. You look at his fights from 6 UFC fights. He hasn't actually landed a takedown of his own. For the large part, he relies on getting taken down or knocked down and then working from his back. He does have a pretty dangerous guard, but that's not going to even be a factor in this one. Greg Hardy has only gone for 2 takedowns across 8 UFC fights, and both of those takedown attempts were against Alexander Volkov in a fight where he was extremely outmatched on the feet and he was trying to change it up, mix it up, because he was getting beaten up, and I don't see him doing the same here. You know, Maurice is okay in the striking department. Troublesome frame, 6'7", 82-inch reach, or 80. I think UFC site have it listed as 80, but I'm pretty sure he's got 82-inch reach. And for the most part, he does try and use that length. He sticks out the teep kicks, goes to the legs a lot, sticks out the jab to try and manage distance, but his defense not great. Footwork rather sluggish. So I think that like an athletic and fast guy such as Greg Hardy should have no problems getting around that defense. Similar in a way to Sergey Pavlovich, who knocked him out in within a couple of minutes of the first round. Kind of another fast athletic guy, probably a tier above Greg Hardy, but similar sort of athleticism. Another strategy I think Greg Hardy's going to implement is the leg kicks. I think he's going to go to the legs of Green a ton, hamper that movement and further allow him to close distance. You know, he landed 27 leg kicks last time out against De Castro, and that was a fight that showed me enough, or showed me more from Hardy, like the ability to go the distance, fight out his strategy, outland his opponent, keep the volume through 15 minutes, whilst also keeping his IQ in check, which has been a problem for him previously. It showed me enough to really like him here. I know Green can't fight like that. There are huge holes in his conditioning. No better example than the absolutely disgusting performance against Jan Vellante last time out. You know, he was losing the fight against a guy who's light heavyweight, super undersized, came up because he can't be bothered cutting weight and looked horrible. Got dropped in the 3rd round, gassed, and then luckily subbed Jan whilst on the bottom with like an arm triangle choke, simply because Jan just gassed out. It was ridiculous. Have a look just at that 3rd round. I wouldn't recommend watching the whole fight, but gross. And then on top of all of those problems, he has huge lapses of concentration, tries to enter the pocket with uppercuts, leading uppercuts or strikes from odd angles, and when doing so he almost always gets caught, and that's what I see here. Hardy landing an absolute bomb of an overhand right on Maurice's chin, sitting him down, potentially ending it there, potentially with some ground and pound. But yeah, that's what I see. Cardio edge also goes to Hardy, but I'm still going to play this early and take the first round, and although it's short on verdict 1.88 times, struggle to see it any other way, and I'm going to roll out with that. Next fight along, Kevin Holland versus Mahmoud Muradov. What have we got here? Holland's 19-5 as a pro, a ridiculous record for considering he made his pro debut in 2015. And Muradov is 24-6. Actually, tough fight to pick, probably one of the tougher ones of the card. Muradov is on a tear at the moment, albeit not all of them in the UFC. He's on a 13-fight win streak, spanning across just the last 3 years. Super active. 2 of those fights in the UFC. One his debut against Dihiriko via decision, and then he knocked out Trevor Smith last time out in the 3rd round of their fight. In terms of recency or recent form, Holland also showing me plenty. He's won his last 3 at middleweight against Anthony Hernandez, Joaquin Buckley, and then most recently Darren Stewart. To their skill sets, I'll talk about Muradov first. Pure striker, and to get even more specific, a boxer at that. He rarely kicks. When he does, it's to the body and head. He never goes to the legs. Actually never. As for his hands though, really good quality hand speed, definitely has the power. 16 of his pro wins via knockout, and yeah, very able. He loves the 1-2, similar to Kevin Holland. It's probably his favourite combination. We haven't seen much of his wrestling game yet. He isn't the one to initiate clinches, but so far his defense has held up. I think Dihiriko tried for 2 takedowns, Trevor Smith tried for 1, stuffed all 3 of those. And then he did actually secure 1 takedown of his own in the 2nd round against Trevor Smith. But that was more of a slip, kind of in which he fell into Trevor's guard. Did end up taking the back in a space of a few seconds there, and locked up a rear naked until the bell rang out. I think they had 10 seconds to play with. But it was a really odd scramble in exchange, and I won't be banking on any kind of credible ability off that one moment. As for Holland, he similarly doesn't initiate wrestling exchanges too often either, but it's definitely the more experienced grappler of the two, and he's going to hold an experience edge overall. You know, Muradov has had more pro bouts, but Holland's been at the top level far longer, has come up against far more dangerous comp, and it's so hard to know exactly the level of fighter these guys who are on the regional scene take on, which is pointed out perfectly by Shakarova and Malkoon last week. And although Holland can be a little bit unreliable and not show the best of IQ at times, he's just a super gritty guy who loves to test himself in the areas of MMA that his opponent thrives in. You know, tangling with GM3 on the ground, trying to strike with these beasts like Joaquin Buckley, Darren Stewart, like powerhouses I'm talking, not beasts perhaps in the level of skill and ability, but he loves to kind of get into that fight and just almost like an ego thing, and for that reason I think this fight takes place on the feet for the majority. And however nice Muradov's hands might be, I think Holland's going to be too much for him there. He's far more versatile with the kicks, with the areas of the body that he targets, slightly slicker with his movement in and out of range, and then it's just a really tricky frame to compete with as well at the weight class. He's going to have a 6-inch reach advantage here, which will pay dividends to his style, fighting on the outside, firing the 1-2 down the pipe, and it's going to also take away from Muradov's style as well, because he, at 75 inches of reach, is also used to kind of being the longer guy in there as well. Holland's just that freaky gangly arms. And yeah, Holland's 1-2 down the pipe, always so accurate, and I feel like with that extra length at 185, regularly catches guys off guard. They feel like they're out of range and they're not. And then when he does enter the pocket, he reads his opponent so well, super reliable defensively once he gets there with his hand positioning and head movement. Go back and watch his most recent fights, see him entering the pocket against really powerful knockout artists like Darren Stewart, Joaquin Buckley, to see that. And then when he does get hit clean, he tends to roll with it, handles the shot extremely well, and has actually never been finished by strikes. The only thing I worry for is Holland's conditioning. He always starts super strong, but tends to fade a minute or two into the last round. The good thing for him here, and the counter argument in my head, is that it's typically the grappling that wears him down late, and I can't see Muradov going that route, as I just haven't seen that ability. I think it's going to be a stand-up affair. So to my prediction, I think Holland takes this one. I think he lands greater volume, manages to land the cleaner strikes as well. takes the first 2 rounds pretty easily, or I don't want to say easy, but takes the first 2 rounds, tosses up, the third round's a toss up, and yeah, wins 29-28 off 30-27s. I also know that if he needs to, he can go to the grappling and will likely have the upper hand in that department if that eventuates. So yeah, the decision's paying 3.06 times on verdict. I like that for Kevin Holland, but should be an entertaining fight, and I think, you know, that's my fight of the night. Co-main time, Andre Fili versus Bryce Mitchell. Fili, big underdog on verdict, 5.02 times and $2.39 at the bookies. Bryce Mitchell 1.25 times and $1.56 at the bookies. Fili is 21-7 as a pro, and Mitchell's 13-1. It's kind of an interesting co-main slot here because Fili is still a young guy. He's been in the game for a long time and kind of flown under the radar, whilst Mitchell seems to be this really popular up-and-comer, heavily favoured in the public eye. As to their skill sets, Bryce Mitchell, lots of people know about him. He's an extremely talented jiu-jitsu practitioner. Of his 13 pro wins, 9 via submission, and remarkably 8 of those in the first round. He transitions between submissions very, very seamlessly, effortless in his setups, as well as being able to kind of control his opponent fairly decisively on the ground. Referencing that Charles Rosa fight in that one, 30-25, 30-25, 30-24, ridiculous for a 3-round fight. He was just smothering. His takedowns have also been improving across his first 4 UFC fights, kind of improving on his entries, not shooting so empty, setting it up with the hands first. But the wrestling game will be tested in this matchup, and for certain Fili will be his toughest test in that regard. Fili, very capable wrestler, plenty of good wrestling partners at ATT in the lower weight divisions. Heard a lot of people talking about that, Uriah, Faber, etc. Also has also has offensive ability. With the wrestling, probably wise to not utilize that skill set in this fight. But you know, if you know offense, you know defense, you know balance, way to get guys off balance, and how to keep yours when someone's doing the same things that you would be doing. If we talk about the feet, the striking area, Fili's going to have the big advantage. You know, Bryce Mitchell is truly a specialist in his BJJ ability. I can't see him troubling Andre on the feet whatsoever. Some stats for you. Across his first 4 UFC fights, Bryce Mitchell's only managed to land 30 total strikes from distance, which is that classic striking range. And to put that in perspective, across the same time frame, Andre's landed 201 distance strikes. You know, Fili takes the advantage everywhere on the feet. Versatility, Mitchell doesn't kick, rarely goes to the body. You know, advantage in speed, has far better head movement and better footwork, edges power, whilst also being stronger in the clinch and up against the cage with the Muay Thai game. And as the underdog here, especially with the verdict price, I'm really liking Fili's chances. You know, of course, if this does get to the ground, it spells big trouble. But even so, Mitchell had Charles Rosa on the ground for 12 minutes and 50 seconds in his last fight and still couldn't find the finish. Rosa, a decorated black belt in BJJ in his own right, but that's a long time on the ground to not finish a guy for someone that's so dangerous. Fili has that same level of grittiness, and he definitely has defensive ability to fight off submission attempts, and then better wrestling than Rosa, in my opinion, in order to not allow that extent of takedowns, or that amount of takedowns and extent of control time. And then on the feet, he should have his way. He'll look to stay on the outside of Bryce, chop the legs up, set up kicks to the head, keep moving his feet, getting them underneath his base to avoid shots out in the open, and then dig underhooks in the clinch to reverse Bryce when they get up against the cage, work some of his Muay Thai game with the knees and the elbows, and just try and get Bryce desperate, shooting out in the middle where it's much easier to defend, and then maybe potentially set up a finish. You know, Fili definitely has the power and skill to set up a knockout shot. He's got 9 career wins via strikes, but he has only secured 1 knockout since 2015. Mitchell, from what I've seen, does seem relatively durable, and also kind of the conditioning between the two also seems similar. Both slow down marginally in the third, so I can't reason a late finish with fatigue becoming a factor. So with that all being said, I'm going to take Andre Fili via decision. It's currently 7.77 times on verdict, which is extremely attractive odds. Yeah, I think we might be in for another veteran performance out of Andre Fili, similar to his last performance against Charles Jourdain. And at least that's what I'm hoping for, taking him on. Hopefully I've got the right read. And Bryce Mitchell with the camo shorts doesn't fuck me over. Anyway, main event time now. Uriah Hall versus Anderson Silva. Uriah Hall 1.59 times and $1.43. Anderson Silva 2.69 times and $2.86. So the verdict price and the bookmaking odds very, very similar. Uriah Hall 16-9 as a pro. Silva 34-10 with 1 no contest. And this is Anderson Silva's last bout on his contract. Hopefully his last fight ever. Hopefully he doesn't sign with another promotion post UFC, but we'll see. As I've already said, interesting odds, somewhat justified, but I do think Uriah Hall is a little bit short with the bookmaker odds, $1.43 there. I mainly say that due to the inconsistent performances we've seen out of him. His motivation has been questioned in the past, highlighted perhaps the most after the Paulo Costa fight, where we saw him take on Bevon Lewis. Now, I do think Bevon's a decent fighter, but he isn't that top tier, and he was outstriking Uriah for the first 2 rounds of that fight, and Uriah was going to lose the decision before he found that 3rd round knockout. In his most recent fight though, he did look okay against Antonio Carlos Jr. He was a 3-1 underdog in that fight, or almost a 3-1 underdog, $2.80 or something like that. He did struggle a little bit. Well, he struggled a lot with the grappling game, but that is Carlos's game. So strong in that area, and he's a really large guy for the division. But Uriah showed us that striking prowess is still there, and in his post-fight interviews and all the interviews since, his motivation, his head does seem screwed on. He knows he's getting older, and it's time to go. And as for his striking, that's what Hall does best. He's very, very dangerous on the feet, extremely fast, loves to throw spinning attacks, obviously carries knockout power, and is so long for the division. I like his jab. He throws it from his chest, gets it out fast. And if you look back at the Paulo Costa fight, he was piecing Costa up with that strike through the first 2 frames of their fight, smashing up his nose, bloodying him up. And then his kicking game really is elite. You just have to look at his highlight reel to see that, and that will undoubtedly play a role in this one. We've seen Anderson Silva become extremely susceptible to kicks, especially kicks to the legs. All of his opponents that have chased that since the Weidman fights have always found success with that technique. And the Silva of old is not what we see today. He's won just a single fight since he lost the title to Weidman, which was a controversial decision to Derek Brunson, in which he was outstruck by 15, 20 odd strikes and taken down 3 times without securing any takedowns of his own. He did show in the Adesanya fight that he still has some elusiveness, possesses decent movement with the head and the feet, as well as the IQ to try and bait his opponents in, walk them onto shots and set it all up. But the speed isn't there anymore. Neither is the real pop on his shots. His reactions are much slower, and his conditioning's just depleted. Uriah Hall has also struggled with cardio in the past, but he fights far more reserved in his most recent fights, and he'll definitely be the fresh guy late in this one. And then of course, at 45 years old now, the durability of Silva's shot. I can't take too much, well I can, because Uriah and Cannonier are somewhat similar, but Cannonier is a powerhouse, but the manner in which Silva was reacting to every shot in that fight was not something I want to see, and for all of those reasons above, I cannot be picking Anderson Silva. I think that he will have every opportunity to look good in this fight. They'll likely meet in the middle, neither guy being overly aggressive or pressuring forward, not walking each other down, so to speak. Spend lots of time circling around without throwing strikes, set their own paces for portions. But ultimately, at this stage in their careers, Uriah Hall's simply the more dangerous striker. I think he's smart enough to avoid those traps that Silva places. Pump that jab out there, love that jab, smash up Silva's face, swirl the eyes, mess up the nose while circling around him and chopping at the legs. And if that's the case, as it really should be in my opinion, relatively straightforward, Silva won't last the 25 minutes. People have argued the potential for wrestling in this one on Anderson's behalf, fighting the ground game, which he does have. He has jits, which would be a great technique as well to take some danger away from Uriah on the feet, but I'm just not even going to really talk about that. Silva hasn't secured a takedown since his first fight against Chael Sonnen way back in 2010. Extremely hard to make a case for that happening. I won't waste time. To my pick, as I've alluded to already, I'm taking Uriah Hall, taking it via knockout at 3.16 times. I think we do see Anderson wearing a fair bit of damage in this one. Has the potential to be a little slow and boring, like I said, stylistically at some points, but I think it ends in a finish. I'll be playing the knockout in the 3rd round as well. Enough time for kind of the gas tank of Silva to empty, the damage to accumulate, and then Hall to shut the lights off. And another bit of reasoning behind that, behind the 3rd round, is 5 of Uriah's 11 knockout wins have been in the 3rd frame as well. Alright, so quickly to wrap things up, we go to the betting side of things. We lost the multi per half Annum last week, but it does not matter. We're still plus 59.709 units with a record of 3 wins, 13 losses. Today, or this weekend, we're going for similar odds, $22.74. We've got Hardy by knockout, Holland by knockout, all points, Andre Fili and Uriah Hall by knockout. So yeah, you've heard my reasoning behind all of those. I've taken the extra security with Holland by knockout there, just for the fact that I think the fight takes place on the feet for the most part, and he definitely has that length and that knockout ability, 1-2 down the pipe. Just Andre Fili money line because I can't be sure of how that one plays out. Bryce Mitchell, yeah, could win, but I think Andre Fili is the value underdog, and then Uriah Hall by knockout. Not the greatest odds on that, but I can't see Anderson surviving 25. And yeah, like I said, $22.74 on the multi. To the single players, I've actually come up with 2 this week. We took a hit last week. I was trying to push us over and it just wasn't my time. Like I said, I picked 5 of the 6 fighters correct, but just none of the methods really. So the single players record, 4 wins, 10 losses for a loss of 2.8 units. My first single play, we are diving down into the prelims. We've got Kevin Natividad Kevin Natividad to beat Miles Johns at $2.50. Taking a punt here on the debutant in Natividad, but he has been fighting LFA for a couple of years now, 4 or 5 fights. Good to see wins in a high level promotion, so I trust his skill set. Unlike other debutants, he has really heavy hands for bantamweight, similarly built to Miles Johns, which is unusual for 135. Both really big guys, really wide. Miles Johns is a wrestler predominantly, and just has so much success due to his size and that width, the strength in the clinch, but Natividad can seriously compete in that department, has super solid wrestling defense himself, and then on the ground, Natividad has the more dangerous jiu-jitsu for sure. Only 3 wins via sub as a pro, but really decorated amateur, 13-1 amateur record with 8 submission wins. And then with the striking, I think Natividad will have the much heavier hands, land the more damaging blows. Both guys have 1 loss on their record. Both was a knockout. So both susceptibility there cancel each other out. Should be a really exciting fight. I like Natividad as the dog. I might even play the double chance finish prop when it's released. Should be about $3 to $4. And who knows what it'll be. But I think it should be about that. And I like that play. And then my next single play is Andre Fili to beat Bryce Mitchell at $2.30. That's the best price I could find. It's already shortened up a bit. I think they started closer. Money came for Bryce, and now money's coming back for Andre. Veteran performance. My reasoning's already out there. I'm expecting and hoping that out of Andre. If it goes to the ground, Bryce Mitchell's probably going to notch up a sub, but if it stays on the feet, Bryce Mitchell's got no chance. Alright, so that's everything from me. I'll put up a screen cap of my verdict picks and kind of XP outlays. Appreciate if you've stayed around this long. If you liked the video, give it a like, drop a subscribe. I'm trying to get videos out every week now for the foreseeable future. Also drop a comment if you kind of want to have a chat, go back and forth. I don't have that big of a fan base, so if you comment your picks, it's likely that we'll open up a communication channel down there, just have a chat about the fights, and who knows, maybe you can give me a bit of insight as well. Aside from that, like I said, cheers for hanging around. Carj up.